every single asset allocator out there needs to do their homework on Bitcoin, because just like myself in 2016, my first thought was, Bitcoin has to be a Ponzi. The reality, though, is you do some work, you see the blockchain in action, you see the beauty of math and code and decentralization, and you're like, my God, this is something I've been searching for 30 years. Why? Because the real Ponzi is the fiat. The fiat currency has consistently been bailed out by Fed printing and quantitative easing. Now, that's the exact definition of what a Ponzi is. Bitcoin is not the Ponzi. Bitcoin is the solution. And again, you got to have two parallel networks. I like talking with Jeff Booth about this. We don't want it to happen quickly, but we both believe over time it is inevitable, and you need to start this network transfer. Okay? And when you do a network transfer, as you know, you don't turn one network right off, right? You turn it, you transfer the network over time. I think we have 5 years, Pomp, but in Jeff Booth's words, we are going to see 100 years of change in the next 10 years.
All right, hello, and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today I want to talk a little bit about some interesting developments with Bitcoin. I want to show you a few nice charts and talk a bit about those. I want to talk about investor sentiment in the traditional finance realm, and then I want to hop over to some charts, because if we don't start to put in higher highs in both Bitcoin and the US equity markets immediately, essentially, if we don't start to do this within the next couple of days, then we have to respect where we are in the daily cycles. So I'm going to show you where we are in the daily cycles. I'm going to show you that if we can't put in higher highs very, very soon, then we are likely going to be trending down. Now, this is not a bearish call. This is not to say we have to crash. This is not to say I'm exiting all my longs and flipping short or anything like that. This just simply is having awareness of where we are in the daily cycles, understanding that daily cycle lows will form for both the S&P 500 and for Bitcoin around the 9th of May. Give it a few days either side for some wiggle room, and that is where we'll be looking to get maximum aggression back in terms of allocation. So in the meantime, sit back, relax, hit that like button, and let's get into this. Did you know that we are just 60 days out, less than 60 days, from the $1 million Balaji Bitcoin target? So if you don't know about this, Balaji accepted a bet that the dollar would go into hyperinflation within 90 days of the term of accepting it. You can see here on his banner, this is what the chart would have to look like to get to $1 million. If you don't know about this, then go and do some digging on Balaji's page. I've also put a video out about this, but I'm sure most of you are well aware of this. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how far away from $1 million we are in the next 2 months. I found this and I thought it was interesting. I thought I'd share this with you. As you can see from the bottom, this is Bitcoin's seasonality. This is the seasonal tendency of price behavior of Bitcoin, and it covers around 10 years of data averaged out. The red line above is Bitcoin's current price. And as you can see, this dip that we are currently undergoing aligns perfectly with the seasonal tendency for Bitcoin. What's also interesting to me about this, and I'll show you the cycles as I said as we get to the end of the video, from a seasonal tendency perspective alone, we should expect this to resolve to the upside before dropping into that cycle low early May, which is right around the timing band that I am calling for Bitcoin to have a 60-day cycle low. So again, we'll get to the charts shortly, but I thought that was interesting. Also, we could well be putting in some kind of pattern. As you can see, this is remarkably similar to prior price action. If this fractal is to play out, and of course I don't know whether it will or not, but if it is to, as you can see from here, this dip is almost done and will soon be resolving to the upside. Of note as well, look down here, this is the 8th of May. I'm calling for a cycle low around the 9th of May, and is that potentially going to be where it occurs? Over the last couple of videos, I've been talking about the hash rate increasing and this possibly being attributed to Russia. There's been a lot of speculation that Russia has been the driving force behind the increase in hash rate. And as of yesterday, they announced that they are creating a special organization to mine Bitcoin and crypto. Of course, this is ahead of them announcing that they are getting ready to settle international trade using Bitcoin and crypto. So this looks like one of the times potentially that the speculation has become reality. Here you can see the hash rate, as you can see, absolutely parabolic at the hard right edge. The big question for me here is, how long can other nations like the US, China, the UK, and Europe all sit on the sidelines and allowing Russia to accumulate massive amounts of hash rate? Game theory will soon be playing out, and I would not be surprised if we start to see China, Europe and the USA all start to race to add additional hash rate as well, causing this metric to continue to climb even higher and even more aggressive than it already is. Over in El Salvador, they are about to start a university education program to produce world-class Bitcoin and Lightning developers as of Monday. So El Salvador continues to take the lead. Of course, they are the pioneers in adopting the Bitcoin standard, being the first nation in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. And despite an awful lot of media FUD, despite an awful lot of FUD from the IMF, El Salvador continues to thrive as a direct result of adopting the Bitcoin standard. Over in traditional finance, Tesla reported earnings last night, and the key thing for Bitcoiners here is they have revealed that they have sold not a single Satoshi of their $321 million Bitcoin position, which they hold in their corporate treasury. Speaking of traditional finance, make no mistake, the bull-bear ratio is as low as it's ever been. Look how soured sentiment is. Now, this does not preclude a move lower in the short term, and as we're about to get to the charts, I'm about to show you, like I said at the start of the video, given where we are in the daily cycles, it's kind of reasonable to expect a pullback. But this ratio being down here, the amount of bearishness in the market, tells me that the max pain out of these cycle lows is a move higher. Continuing on with this theme of sentiment, you can see the growth expectations here, okay? The lowest levels ever. Bearishness continues to be the crowded trade at the moment. And lastly, just before we get into the charts, I noticed this from Root. He said since he's been tracking M2 data, global M2 data, remember M2 being the money supply, he noticed that the Bank of Canada just changed their M2 data all the way back to January of last year. Japan and the US recently also changed years of M2 data. He says it's only billions of dollars that they didn't previously mention. So the big question here is, why do they want to change the M2 data? Why is it that they don't want us to see the true amount of printing that has occurred? I would speculate that it's likely because they do not want us to be concerned and to start to look for exits such as Bitcoin, physical gold, and physical silver. As a side note, this is why it's never been harder to be a trader. The data is completely fake. They hide things. The CPI data, as we know, as I'm sure everyone knows, is really the CPI data. And this is why I advocate for sharp technical analysis. The chart and the price is always the truest form. It's always the first thing to react. And therefore, I think we can, over time, start to ignore these make-believe numbers and datas and start to look solely at price. So the dollar, it doesn't want to lose its 100 level, does it? It doesn't want to come down and make a new low. So far, we've got this double bottom in play. This could be a breakout retest looking for resumption higher. Of course, if that's to happen, we could expect some pullbacks in risk assets over the coming days and weeks. Yields could really go over way at this point. This could be an equal higher like double top with this recent peak that resolves to the downside, or it could be about to move higher, again, pressuring risk in the short term as it starts to price in the next 25 basis point hike that we are expecting to see at the next FOMC meeting. So here's the S&P. I was talking about cycles. I'm going to show you that now. If I measure from this low to here, this is a 40-day cycle. So typically speaking, we would expect this plus or minus a few days, telling us to be open to seeing a pullback into a cycle low within the next couple of weeks. The reason I said earlier at the start of this video that if we don't start to make higher highs soon, then we have to assume we're going to drop down into this cycle low is because we're on day 26. So usually by the time we get to around day 32 to 33, that would look something like this. And then we would expect a nice drop down to clear the sentiment out into that cycle low before we can think about recovering higher again. However, if we don't start to make higher highs immediately, then we're going to lose this upward sloping yellow support line. And as we do that, we're likely going to start to bleed down into the next cycle low. Now, how low down it goes is anybody's guess. It could be here, it could be all the way down here, or all the way down here. I have no idea. Obviously, nobody knows how low it will go. But the reason I flag this is because it's important to have the situational awareness. As we approach this cycle low timing band, we know there is going to be a drop down into a cycle low. So it's important to formulate a plan. Are you going to take some off on a breakdown and look to add back after we form a cycle low, perhaps with a trend line break? Or are you going to be willing to weather the storm? Are you going to be willing to ride out wherever this cycle low ends up forming? The NASDAQ, as you can see here, still holding above this local high cluster. So I like to see that. Given that Tesla is down quite a bit following its earnings yesterday, I wouldn't be surprised to see us lose this level and come in towards a touch of this upward sloping red support line. For me personally, that would align perfectly with the cycle low for the S&P 500. As long as we're above this red upward sloping support line, I have absolutely no problem holding my longs. But if we were to break down from here and start to lose this level, then I would not personally want to be anywhere near longs. Here's the Dow. The Dow, again, kind of speaks, as far as I can tell, to wanting a little pullback before it can think about resolving to the upside. So, of course, one day at a time, we'll take it as it comes. The VIX here catching a little bit of a counter trend move. Now, make no mistake about it, this is still being suppressed massively. We have still lost critical levels, and for all we know, this is likely a breakdown, retest, resumption. I see an awful lot of people calling for a major VIX spike. Anything can happen, and things can change, and they can change quickly, but they haven't changed yet. Until we get back above here, this green horizontal, and then out of this red downward sloping resistance line, it's reasonable to expect continuation to the downside. Here's Apple. Apple continues to climb, so all the while we're above this upward sloping blue support line, I have no problem pushing this long. And it's the same deal for Nike. So breakout, possible retest, possible confluence of support, flipping the red downward sloping one from resistance into support, and holding the upward sloping blue support line. If we can do that, happy days. If we lose this upward sloping blue support line, I don't want to be anywhere near longs. So here's Bitcoin. Again, cycle low awareness is important. Now this low could form anywhere. It could be all the way down at 25 to retest the breakout level in yellow. It could be even lower than that and still maintain bullish structure. It could be all the way down at 22K for a touch of this red upward sloping support line here. But now, all the while we're above this upward sloping blue support line and looking to break out, then it's reasonable to expect higher highs if we can break out. However, if we can't, if we end up doing something like this and then breaking down, then we know that that is the high for this 60-day cycle, and we'll be targeting a 60-day cycle low somewhere around the 9th of May, wherever it decides to form. So if Bitcoin is going to make a higher high, it really needs to do it soon so that it can drop into its cycle low and go. Otherwise, this cycle low is going to end up forming significantly lower down, something like this. Again, to be clear, this is not me flipping bearish. This is not me saying the trend is over or anything like that. This is simply having cycle low awareness. We know Bitcoin behaves in these 60-day cycle lows. We've used them very consistently to pick nice swings, nice entries, including this bottom one here. And we got a long on a breakout here as well. Here's our recent long for a breakout of this downward sloping red resistance line. So this stuff works, okay? I proved this time and time again. Like I said, I'm not flipping bearish. I'm just saying that we know a cycle low is coming, and if we don't get a pop-up soon, then it's reasonable to expect further downside. Ethereum, I'm getting ready to exit this position. If it can't hold this upward sloping blue support line, then I'm going to be jumping out of this trade. So if we close on a daily closing basis below here, then expect me to tell you I have exited this position for a profit. XRP, we're still kind of pushing this trade. We're still about 20% up from our entry, which was the breakout of this red horizontal line. So I want to see what happens here. I'm not really too fast. I have moved the stop up. I'll add the stop in now. So I have moved the stop up. As you can see, this is where it currently sits. So if price comes down and touches this, then I will be walking away with this tiny bit of profit here. In the meantime, I'm looking to see if I can push this trade, see if we can get one more push up. And then if we can, I'll look to exit higher up. Gold and silver. I know some of you really wanted to see this. So again, we're still kind of hanging on, aren't we? We've wicked this level. We're currently above it. I think if we can get a convincing breakdown, we can short this. I think we can short this move if we can get a breakdown of this trend line. Now we've wicked it, as you can see, but currently we're right above it. So anything could happen from here. We could continue upside and we could get a breakout, in which case that could be a long on a breakout above this. Or we could waddle up around here and then break down, in which case I would personally be thinking about shorts at this point. If we were to break down soon, again, then that would signal even more weakness, and I would be looking for a dive down before we can think about returning higher. Here's silver. So breakout, retest, resumption of this box area. It has fired its early warning sign by losing this upward sloping purple support line, but this could really go either way. Again, we really need to see dollar weakness for the metals to resolve to the upside. If the dollar is going to get some kind of counter trend bounce like I showed you earlier, then it's perfectly reasonable to expect the metals to suffer in the near term. Here's the senior miners, senior gold miners, as you can see, also firing their first warning shot with a loss of this upward sloping blue support line. But the original trade thesis is still valid. We had a breakout of this blue box, breakout, retest, looking for that resumption. Again, it all depends on gold. If gold is going to break down, then these are going to get stopped out, and hopefully we can use the gold short to pay for the stops. If, however, gold can resolve to the upside, then expect the miners to follow them. It's the exact same deal on the junior miners. So early warning sign fired, second early warning sign fired because we're back inside of this box. So I'll let the stop do the worrying. I'm not one for really getting in and out of trades or trying to interfere with them. The thesis was valid. The stop was here. So I'll let the stop do the worrying. If we have to pay a stop, we have to pay a stop. That's what they're for. And it's basically the exact same story for the silver junior miners, isn't it? So we've lost this. We're back in here. It looks like we're going to have to pay a stop. But I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had a setup like this and then it's waddled around inside the box before resolving massively to the upside. If you get into the habit of seeing something like this and then cutting your trade, then you risk having to hop back in at higher levels as it gaps up. And so to show you an example of this exact setup happened with Apple. Here's Apple. So we took the long on the breakout retest resumption of this box. Then what happened a few days later is we come down and wicked it. Now I could have easily cut the trade there and said the thesis was a trend line break here, a box breakout, and we're back inside the box, so I'll cut the trade. But by letting the stop do the worrying, by not getting in the middle of my trade and interfering with my original trade thesis, which was the box breakout with a stop loss down here, I ended up being able to stay in this trade for then a gap higher and go. So this is something I see all the time. I buy the breakout, we end up almost getting stopped out. Sometimes we do, and then it resolves to the upside. So over time, I've just learned to let my stop do the worrying, not interfere. And so that goes for the minor positions. I don't, you could easily look here and say, well, we broke out and we're back inside, so cut the trade. But there's also nothing to stop the dollar breaking down any day now, and this just popping up and resolving to the upside. So I'm going to let the stop do the worrying. This was my invalidation level. If the trade is invalidated, I'll be stopped out. But that is, again, what stops are for. The crypto-related equities, again, given what I said about Bitcoin and Bitcoin cycle lows, it's kind of reasonable to expect some level of dip over the coming days and weeks into that 9th of May timeframe before we can resolve higher. So Coinbase for the moment, still sideways. MicroStrategy holding key levels, isn't it? So we're still above this upward sloping blue support line. We're still above the range breakout. Again, though, it wouldn't be beyond the realm of expectation to see some kind of waddle and a drop into the 9th of May before we resolve higher. Riot, still above this blue support line. Obviously, this was quite an extended move. Happy to give some of this back in the short term here. Hopefully, we can maintain the top of this trend line. But again, it wouldn't be beyond the realm of expectation to see a drop into the 9th of May before we can resolve higher. I personally will be looking to add more exposure at that 9th of May cycle low, depending on whether or not the market will give me a nice, obvious, easy setup. And the exact same is true of Marathon. So breakout, retest, possibly coming in for a retest of this range break into that cycle low, and then we can go. So one day at a time as ever, and we'll see what the market can give. So that's it from me today. Hope you found value. Hope you're doing well in life. And in the meantime, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Cómo defenderse de un ataque con cuchillo. Él va a ser el que me va a atacar. Por supuesto, yo voy a ser el que se va a defender, ¿sí? Del ataque con cuchillo. El primer ataque va a ser, yo bloqueo. Ahora.
Te voy a atacar.
Sí, ataque. Ahí va, yo bloqueo. Bloqueo, paso por abajo y... ¡Ay, pará! No. Ya, cruz, ahí. Ay, no. Yo tengo cuándo atacar porque si no, no puedo hacer. Pará, ataca, ahora. Yo defiendo. Pará. ¡Ay! No, te ataco, cruz, ¿ves? No, atacar con cuchillo, ahí va, defiendo con patada, ahí.
¿En serio, gordo?
Sí, ahí, eso, ahora sí, perfecto. Bueno, pará,